spend with you. So here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether.
There was something in the news this past week that kind of struck my eye and ear. And what that was our president, Mr. Biden, talking with the prime minister of Israel. And when Mr. Biden was going to go there, he said, I want to talk with him in order that he will have a come to Jesus meeting. And I thought, interesting, that they would want a Jewish leader over the state of Israel to have a come to Jesus meeting, a meeting of the mind. What will it take to get that man to that proverbial come to Jesus meeting? See, we started talking that way about a come to Jesus meeting or moment back in the 1970s. And what it means is for a situation in life to come to that moment when a decision has to be made, i.e., come to Jesus moment. And it started to be used by the mega churches and preachers of that ilk. And then it began to filter into society. And it could mean any number of things now. But I thought, that's actually a pretty good place to start a lesson. What will it take? What will it take to get each and every one of us to that point, to have a come to God type of mind? What will it take to get us to that point? I want you to go back, if you would, into the book of Chronicles, the Old Testament, and look down at verse 12 with me. And it's dealing with a man by the name of Asa, A-S-A. And in the 39th year of his reign, Asa became diseased in his feet. His disease was severe. Yet even in his disease, he did not seek the Lord, but physicians. So Asa slept with his father, having died in the 41st year of his reign. So whatever the disease was, lasted 2 years. But it was severe. But it didn't bring him to the point of a come to, metaphorically, come to Jesus meeting. We are surrounded each and every day by people who are trapped in life. There's no way out for them. Life's kind of pressed hard, and there's no escape. Yet they will not turn to God. Remember the earthquake in 94, for those of you that were here? After the initial shocks, my boys and I set out to check on members of the church. And we found some that were in pretty good shape, had a lot of rubble to be picked up and things of that nature. One individual who was advanced in age got over there and he was sitting in a pickup truck. And I said, well, what do you need help with? He said, well, I got my paper, but I need my teeth, and I need orange juice, and I need a donut. So I said, okay, what are we going to do? He said, well, I'll show you where my teeth are. And you're going to have to dig through to get to the refrigerator to get the orange juice and a donut. So I got him his teeth. We dug through, got him the oranges, got him a donut. That was easy. Next person we went to, trapped on the third floor, looked at the stairwell. Stairwell had separated, about a 3-foot chasm, no other way down. So got in, got the person out, got him across that chasm. Had to jump, but didn't have to pull people out of the rubble. Oh, but there were people pulled out of the rubble. They were trapped underneath different things. The apartments over by Seasun. People had to be pulled out and trapped. But I sat back and wondered if anyone would ever be so trapped that they said, you know what, I don't want to get out. I don't want to get out of here at all. But there are people like that when it comes to life. They could look and they could turn to God, but it's not there for them. Have you ever met somebody like that? Right up to the point of death. And they knew they were going to die. But they would not seek God. What kind of person does that take? Now, I've known people that have done that have been sick to the point of death, but when given an option, they'll turn to God. And even as I said that, I'm mindful of a couple. But then I said, I didn't know of any. But after having said that, my mind triggered to one person in particular who knew he was going to die. I talked with him. He was in the hospital in South Carolina. And I offered him a choice. I said, look, you don't have to go through death through that portal without God. And he said, I heard a story when I was young. And it was about a man in Ireland. And no, I didn't wear green today. I'm sorry, Jim. No green. But there was a man in Ireland. And he was facing the same situation this man was saying as I am. And he was asked about it. He said, well, look, I'm not going to turn to God now. Because if I did not repair the thatched roof when I was alive and able, why would I do so now? And I told the man, that doesn't make sense. He says, yeah, it does. If I didn't do it when I was alive and functioning, and I told him, I said, you're still alive. He said, well, it's too late for me now. You know what? It's never too late. As long as there is life, it's never too late. Asa simply hardened his heart. But I got to thinking about other individuals in the scriptures and what it took to get them to that moment where they stood back and said, no, it doesn't have to be this way. If you go back into the book of Daniel, 4th chapter, and you see the account of Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Babylonian Empire, power beyond power, but arrogance, pomposity had come into his life. And so he had a dream. And Daniel had the ability of interpreting his dreams with the help of God. And so Daniel revealed to him what this dream meant. Daniel told him it doesn't have to be this way. Nebuchadnezzar said, no. Look at me. I'm Nebuchadnezzar. And I'm paraphrasing the scriptures. I am the end all and the be all of all things to all people. and his pomposity and arrogance brought him low. He was relegated to be like an animal. He was out there for a period of time. His fingernails grew like talons. His hair grew to be like eagle feathers. And then look down at verse 34. Daniel 4 and verse 34. And notice what we find there. At the end of that period, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes toward heaven. My reason, some translations say sanity, others knowledge, returned to me. And I blessed the Most High, praised and honored him who lives forever. Now, what he does then is he acknowledges God as the sovereign. He humbles himself and moves from polytheism into monotheism and finds rest and finds what he was looking for. But he had to have that, as we would say today, that come to Jesus moment where he was breaking to the degree that he would lift up his eyes rather than look at himself, and turned and said to God, I need your help. We don't have to go through life without having that help. Dan was mentioning in the announcements about how many have back problems. Oh, yeah, back problems. Who here doesn't have back problems? We all do. We being pretty inclusive. We struggle with things. And yes, I agree with Dan. Prayer does a lot. God can do exceedingly abundantly beyond what we're capable of asking or even thinking, is what Paul writes in Ephesians 4. And we lean on that. We can't always explain it, but we lean on it. And that's what Nebuchadnezzar came to realize. There's another example. Jonah. I look at Jonah, I think, a little bit differently than others. I look at him as kind of a patriot. He was a prophet, and he knew how terrible the kingdom of Assyria was. And Nineveh was chief city therein. And he knew what they were going to do to the northern kingdom of Israel. And so God came to him and told him, I want you to go to Nineveh. And I want you to preach there. Get the people to repent. Otherwise, I'm going to destroy them. Jonah goes, all right. If I don't go and preach to them, then God will destroy them. Beauty plan. It'll save Israel. That's not what God wanted to have happen. So Jonah gets on a boat, tries to run the opposite way. And then a storm comes on. Oh, it's a terrible storm. The boat's about to capsize. Captain's going, well, what are we going to do? Jonah goes, well, look, I know the reason. I know the reason. It's because I'm on the boat. So, God's trying to get my attention. Here's what you need to do. Throw me overboard. Then you'll be saved. Really? Yeah, throw me overboard. Jonah was willing to die. Boom, he's thrown overboard. He's swallowed up by a great fish. And then, in Jonah 2:2, I called out in my distress to the Lord, and he answered me. I cried for help from the depth of Sheol. Thou dost hear my voice. That point, he's in there. And he goes, all right, I guess I need to wake up. And then he came to the realization of his need to serve God. But what did it take? You got to realize how disgusting that is. A whale washed up on in Malibu or Santa Monica last night, and I saw it on the news just before I was sitting in my recliner in the bedroom. Anyways, I saw it and I was going to say, I got to stay and watch what happened here. But have you ever gone down and seen a whale that's beached itself? The stench that comes, whoa. Did you ever go to Ports of Call back before they started the renovation? And the little fishing boats would come in, and you get that fish smell wafting over you. I like fish, but man, I don't like the way it smells. Could you imagine being inside a fish? We don't know what kind of fish it was, but being inside and the stench that would be there, the slime, all of those things. And then you come to your senses. And then to be regurgitated up on dry land. In other words, barfed up. And then to find yourself on the seashore. Then to realize, I still got to go preach to the people in Nineveh. But that's what it took to get Jonah to recognize God was in charge and that he needed God. Now, there's a lot more to the story, but I was just looking at what it would take and what it took to get Jonah to that point. What about the Philippian jailer? He was hearing Paul and Silas sing songs of praise. And they were there locked up in the inner prison. Then an earthquake happens. He's about ready to kill himself because he had been put in charge of all of those prisoners. And if they escaped, they were going to kill him anyways. And so Paul cries out, do yourself no harm, for we are all here. We're all right here. And the jailer had been aroused from sleep. Looking at Acts 16, verse 27. You can see it on the overhead. Roused out of his sleep and had seen the prison doors open. Drew out his sword like we talked about to kill himself. Supposing the prisoners had escaped. We're all here. We're all here. Sirs, what must I do to be saved? That was a come to Jesus moment. Whoa! What do I need to do? My eyes are opened. I've been rocked awake. Now again, think back. 1994. That January morning. 4:31. Sound asleep. Earthquake comes. Picks up Linda. Boing, boing, boing. Throws her out of bed into the hall. And where our bed was situated, that had to be a vertical, then a horizontal shift to her. That's how hard it hit. Threw me out of bed the other way into a dresser we had. I don't know what it did to Adam. I know what it did to our son Micah. Our son Jacob slept right through it. No telling what he was doing the night before. Don't want to know. But he slept through it. But it bounced us. And then the next one hit. Bounced us again. Got our attention most rickety quick. So I can understand where the Philippian jailer is coming from. Because you know the following Sunday, that was on a Monday. The following Sunday, church building was red tagged. But we had an auxiliary building to the side. It was packed. We pulled out chairs so people could sit outdoors. It got people's attention. Roughly 6 weeks following that, one Sunday morning, we had 7 people respond to the gospel. 7 people were baptized. That got their attention. It got them to study, got them to realize where they were, and it was a blessed day. 7 were baptized. Margaret was there. Linda was there. Jim and Kelly weren't. You guys were over Valley Circle. John and Kathy were Oxnard. But 7 was a great day. That earthquake had brought people to their senses, to their knees. But do we need that? Because that's what called for. Prodigal son. He was brought to his knees in the parable. When he endured poverty. When he was on the street. He lost everything his father had given him. And then he's there with the pigs. And he goes, oh man, if only I could eat what the pigs are eating. You ever seen what pigs eat? Blah. They're eating it. Lived in South Carolina. Linda hated going to the grocery store. Hated it because of the meat section. I was duly designated to go to the meat section. I wasn't a big fan. I wasn't a big fan of some of the things they ate out there. But here he is, he's tending the pigs and what they're eating, which is disgusting. He said, boy, would that I eat that. He goes, but I know what I'll do. I've got to humble myself. And somehow or another, I got to go back to my father. Now, in the parable, the father is a representation of deity. And that's basically what's being told. The father is there waiting for us. Waiting. You go into Luke 15, you begin reading there. It's a heart-wrenching story. And then he comes to his senses. He comes to that moment. I got to make a decision. Life doesn't have to go on this way. In my father's house, servants live better than I do. I'll go back there and beg him to take me back as a servant. His father wouldn't hear it. His father brought him back as a son. Put the robe on and put sandals on his feet. My son who was lost has returned to me. So I began thinking about all of these various ones who have had that come to Jesus moment. And then there's David. His choices cost him the life of others. The life of others. Of his unborn child that he had fathered during the affair with Bathsheba. And he turned to God. He was pointed out as being by Nathan, you are that man. He made a turn, went right back to God. I have sinned against the Lord. Now later on, he was said to be a man after God's own heart in Acts the 13th chapter and verse 22. he came to his senses. So, let's jump ahead into the New Testament again. Paul is standing giving a defense before Agrippa. Lays it out very eloquently. Lays it out. And then Agrippa turns to Paul. And Agrippa is not ignorant. He knows the Jewish law. He knows the Jewish promises, the Jewish prophecy, and all of that. And he turns to Paul and says, in a short time, you will persuade me to become a Christian. Well, that's the thought I want to leave with you this morning. If you're not a child of God, what will it take for you to at least give due consideration to putting Christ on in the waters of baptism? What will it take? On the day of Pentecost, Peter laid it out for him. They were pierced to the heart. Said, what must we do? Repent and be baptized, every one of you, for the forgiveness of your sins. That message has not changed in over 2,000 years. That same appeal, that same answer is still what's in effect today. So what will it take? That's one of the things that we offer here. And my son tells me all the time that, Dad, you're not just preaching to those that are here in the building. You're preaching to those on YouTube. So I ask him, how many are there? Well, live, maybe 30. So 30 more, 40 more. Then it goes on to the channel. How many there? Another 50 to 100. And that's going to be there for years and years. And so whoever's listening to this, you're not a child of God. At the end of today's lesson, you'll see a way to contact me. And I'll be glad to arrange to have somebody come and study with you. And the only thing they'll study with you is the Bible. Nothing more, nothing less. That's it. Because what we want to do is simply speak where the Bible speaks. Remain silent where it's silent. Preach a way to get in relationship according to God's directive that He laid out in the Scriptures. That's all we're talking about. Not what man's created, but rather what God has said. So, if you've at any point come to that moment where you realize, I've got to make a decision. I've got to do this. I've got to turn. We'll be glad to sit down and study with you. Answer your questions. Looking at the Scriptures. Then allowing you to make that decision. As did all these ones that we talked about this morning. We sing a song. You can see the chorus on the overhead. Almost persuaded. Come, come today. Almost persuaded. Turn not away. Jesus invites you here. Angels are lingering near. Prayers rise from hearts so dear. O wanderer, come. Almost persuaded. What will it take to persuade you? The question is yours. If anyone is subject to the invitation anyway, whether you need to put on Christ in the waters of baptism, or you need the prayers of the congregation for strength or encouragement, however we can be of spiritual service,